Ladies and gentlemen, at an age when most people begin thinking about retirement and settling into a quieter routine within the comforts of modern society, Dick Proenneke made a radical decision that would define the rest of his life. In 1968, at 51 years old, he turned away from the noise and distractions of the civilized world and journeyed deep into the Alaskan wilderness to carve out a life of solitude and self-sufficiency. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of years of preparation, thought, and a deep-seated desire to live closer to nature. Dick had always been a man of the outdoors. He worked as a mechanic, fisherman, and carpenter, all roles that demanded skill, patience, and self-reliance. But over time, he began to feel the weight of modern life. The fast pace, the constant demands, and the feeling of being disconnected from the natural world. He wanted something more meaningful, a life with fewer distractions and a deeper connection to the earth. When the opportunity arose to stay in the remote region of Twin Lakes in Alaska, he seized it. He didn't go seeking isolation out of bitterness or retreat. He went in search of peace, clarity, and purpose. Dick's choice wasn't just bold. It was nearly unheard of in a time when convenience and comfort were becoming societal norms. Most people thought he was crazy for wanting to leave it all behind and head into the wilderness alone. But for Dick, this was the beginning of something extraordinary. His journey into the heart of Alaska was not just a test of survival, but a personal mission to prove that one man, armed with determination, knowledge, and humility, could thrive completely alone in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. When Dick Proenneke decided to live alone in the Alaskan wilderness, he didn't bring along construction crews or fancy blueprints. He relied entirely on his own two hands, his mind, and the natural resources around him. One of the most remarkable achievements of his journey was the construction of his log cabin at Twin Lakes, a structure that became both a functional shelter and a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. Dick meticulously planned every step of the process. He selected a location that would provide natural shelter, access to clean water, and a defensible position from the harsh Arctic elements. He began by scouting the area for the perfect spruce trees, which he would later fell, debark, and notch himself. Each tree was carefully chosen, not too young, not too old, just the right size and shape for what he had in mind. Then, using only hand tools like an axe, saw, chisel, and mallet, he began to transform raw timber into perfectly fitted building blocks. He built not just a basic shelter, but a well-designed, weather-resistant cabin complete with a stone fireplace, sturdy roof, handcrafted windows, and built-in furniture. His joints were tight, his measurements precise, and his craftsmanship exceptional. He even fashioned wooden hinges, carved door latches, and constructed storage areas, all without nails or modern materials. Everything was shaped from what nature provided and from what he carried in small supply. What made his cabin even more extraordinary was that he recorded the entire process on film and in journals, giving later generations a detailed glimpse into not only the construction techniques, but also the mindset of a man deeply connected to his environment. Each log placed, each corner dovetailed, reflected patience, deep understanding of wood, and the satisfaction that comes from creating something lasting with your own hands. The cabin wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of his independence and respect for the land he called home. Dick Proenneke didn't just move into any ordinary forest. He chose one of the most remote and rugged locations in all of North America. Twin Lakes, nestled deep within the vast wilderness of southern Alaska, near the base of the Aleutian mountain range. This location was far removed from roads, towns, or any signs of modern civilization. Reaching it was no easy task. The area was accessible only by small bush planes that could land on the water or snow, depending on the season. In the summer, float planes would touch down on the lake's glassy surface. In winter, ski-equipped planes were the only option. The region around Twin Lakes is wild, untamed, and stunningly beautiful. Towering mountains rise like stone guardians around the lakes, while thick forests and tundra stretch as far as the eye can see. Wildlife roams freely: moose, bears, wolves, caribou, and the weather can change in an instant, from serene sunshine to blinding snowstorms. This was no tourist destination or temporary camping site. It was raw, untouched wilderness where nature ruled absolutely. Dick selected a site along the upper Twin Lakes shore, where the views were breathtaking and the landscape provided natural advantages. The sun would hit the cabin during crucial parts of the day, helping to warm it in the cold months. The lake itself offered fresh water, fish, and access for planes to deliver occasional supplies. The surrounding woods offered timber, berries, game, and protection from harsh winds. Being so isolated meant Dick had to be entirely self-reliant. There were no neighbors to call for help, no stores to run to, and no electricity to power tools or gadgets. If something broke, he fixed it. If he needed something, he either made it or went without. The silence of Twin Lakes was profound, not just quiet, but complete stillness broken only by the sounds of wind, water, and wildlife. For many, such solitude would be overwhelming. But for Dick, it was exactly the kind of peace he had been searching for. Most people might imagine spending a few days, maybe even a summer, in the wilderness as a challenging adventure. But Dick Proenneke turned that adventure into a way of life, one that spanned more than 3 decades. From 1968 until 1999, Dick lived in his hand-built log cabin year-round, through all seasons, including the long, brutal Alaskan winters that could stretch for months and drop temperatures to 40 or 50 degrees below zero. Living in the wilderness for 30 years isn't just about survival. It requires a complete mental, physical, and emotional shift. Every task, from cooking meals to chopping firewood, takes more time, more energy, and more awareness. There are no conveniences, no shortcuts. Yet Dick thrived in this environment, not as a prisoner of isolation, but as a master of his own domain. Winter, especially, tested his endurance. With daylight hours reduced to only a few hours a day and snow piled high around his cabin, Dick had to prepare months in advance. He stockpiled wood, preserved food, and made sure his tools and clothing were in perfect working condition. He insulated his cabin with moss, crafted snowshoes from scratch, and used a handmade sled to haul supplies across frozen lakes. For warmth, he relied on the fireplace he built himself, and for food, he counted on the fish he caught, the berries he picked, and the occasional game he hunted. But Dick wasn't just surviving. He was observing, learning, and growing. He paid close attention to the natural world around him, tracking the habits of wildlife, charting weather patterns, and writing daily journal entries filled with detail and reflection. Time moved differently in the wilderness. Each day was an opportunity to live deliberately, without the rush or clutter of the outside world. The quiet gave him space to think clearly, the work gave him purpose, and the isolation gave him a profound sense of freedom. Dick Proenneke wasn't just a man who chose to live off the grid. He was also a meticulous observer and chronicler of his daily life in the Alaskan wilderness. From the very beginning of his journey, he made a conscious decision to document everything he did, not for fame or recognition, but to leave behind a detailed record of a life lived simply, deliberately, and in harmony with nature. Every day, Dick wrote in his journals by hand, filling page after page with reflections, descriptions, and observations. These weren't just casual notes. They were rich with information. He recorded the weather conditions, the behavior of wildlife, the progress of his construction projects, and his thoughts on solitude and the human condition. His writing captured not just events, but the emotions and philosophical insights that came with them. Over the years, his journals grew into an extraordinary chronicle, a first-hand account of one man's life in complete isolation, filled with both the mundane and the profound. But Dick didn't stop at writing. He also brought along a wind-up 16mm movie camera, using it to film himself as he worked, explored, and observed his surroundings. This was no small feat. Each time he wanted to record something, he had to carefully set up the camera on a tripod, manually focus the lens, and estimate the framing, often with no one behind the camera. He'd press the timer, run into the frame, and go about his tasks while being filmed. He captured himself building his cabin, preparing meals, trekking through snowstorms, and interacting with wildlife. Every roll of film was a slice of wilderness life, frozen in time. These visual records were later compiled into the now famous documentary, Alone in the Wilderness, which allowed the world to witness the quiet majesty of Dick's life. His footage wasn't flashy or dramatized. It was raw, authentic, and deeply human. Combined with excerpts from his journals, the film painted a vivid portrait of a man completely at peace with his environment. His decision to document his journey made it possible for future generations to not only understand his way of life, but to be inspired by it. In the remote wilderness of Alaska, hundreds of miles away from grocery stores and modern conveniences, Dick Proenneke mastered the art of living off the land. His life was a delicate balance between survival and sustainability, a rhythm that required deep respect for nature and an intimate understanding of the resources around him. With no access to stocked shelves or prepared meals, Dick relied entirely on what the environment could provide, combining traditional knowledge with practical ingenuity to feed and sustain himself throughout the year. Fishing was one of his most reliable food sources. Twin Lakes teemed with Arctic grayling and lake trout, and Dick often caught fish fresh from the water using simple gear. He smoked and preserved the extra catch to store for the winter months when fishing became more difficult. His diet was also supplemented by the wild game in the area. While Dick wasn't a reckless hunter, he occasionally harvested animals like caribou or mountain sheep, always taking only what he needed, never more. He used every part of the animal, wasting nothing, and even documented how he processed and preserved the meat using traditional methods. But Proenneke didn't rely solely on hunting and fishing. During the brief but productive summer months, he cultivated a small garden beside his cabin where he grew vegetables such as potatoes, carrots, beans, and lettuce. He harvested wild berries, blueberries, crowberries, and cranberries, which he either ate fresh or preserved by drying or canning. With no electricity, refrigeration, or access to modern preservatives, he used root cellars, natural cold storage, and carefully timed harvesting techniques to extend the life of his food. Even cooking was a hands-on, mindful process. Using a simple wood stove or open fire, Dick prepared his meals from scratch, grinding his own grain, baking bread in a Dutch oven, and seasoning his dishes with herbs he had gathered himself. Meals were not just sustenance. They were a celebration of his connection to the land. Every bite was earned through labor, patience, and an understanding of seasonal cycles. Living off the land required discipline, foresight, and a deep connection to the natural world. Dick learned to anticipate the changes in weather, to read the movements of animals, and to plan months ahead for what he would need. This self-sufficient lifestyle not only sustained him physically, but gave him a sense of fulfillment that many people in modern society rarely experience. In the heart of the Alaskan wilderness, where supply stores were non-existent and mail deliveries came only occasionally by bush plane, Dick Proenneke embraced a level of self-sufficiency that most people today can scarcely imagine. He didn't just survive, he thrived, by depending entirely on his skills, creativity, and resourcefulness. From the tools he used to the furniture he sat on, nearly everything in his cabin was handcrafted using natural materials or repurposed items he had brought with him. One of the first things Dick did after building his cabin was fashion a wide array of tools, often using old materials in innovative ways. He made wooden mallets, chisels, handles for knives and saws, and even hinges and latches for his doors and windows, all by hand. If a tool broke, he repaired it. If he needed something he didn't have, he built it. His approach was deeply methodical and patient. He often documented the process in detail, noting what worked, what failed, and what he could improve next time. There was no room for waste or excess. Every item had to be functional, durable, and multi-purpose. The interior of his cabin was a marvel of wilderness craftsmanship. He carved his own chairs, stools, shelves, and even a bed frame using hand tools and local wood. He designed his furniture to suit his specific needs and the limited space of his cabin, maximizing functionality without sacrificing comfort. His handcrafted stone fireplace kept the space warm through brutal winters, while his cooking and food prep areas were organized with precision and care. Even the utensils he used, spoons, ladles, cutting boards, were often whittled from scrap wood or bone. Beyond tools and furniture, Dick also made clever use of every resource at his disposal. He repurposed tin cans into containers, fashioned leather from hides, and even created ink from natural dyes for his writing. Nothing went to waste. His lifestyle wasn't just self-sufficient. It was environmentally conscious, minimalistic, and deeply respectful of the land. What's truly remarkable is that Dick didn't view these daily tasks as burdens. Instead, he took joy in the act of creating, in shaping something useful with his own hands. Each item he made was a reflection of his skill, his patience, and his deep understanding of how to live in balance with nature. His self-sufficiency wasn't born out of necessity alone. It was a conscious choice, a philosophy of life that valued independence, mindfulness, and simplicity. For many, the idea of living alone in a remote cabin, surrounded by nothing but trees, mountains, and silence, would seem daunting, even terrifying. But for Dick Proenneke, solitude was not something to be feared. It was something to be embraced. He didn't retreat into the wilderness to escape the world. He entered it to reconnect with something deeper, something primal and meaningful that he felt modern life had stripped away. Over his 3 decades at Twin Lakes, Dick developed a profound relationship with solitude, and through it, discovered an inner peace that few ever experience. Being alone in the wilderness didn't mean being lonely. Dick never expressed bitterness or sadness about his isolation. Instead, he saw it as a gift, an opportunity to slow down, to listen, to observe, and to live with intention. Free from the constant noise and distractions of modern society, he found clarity in the quiet and purpose in the simplicity of his daily routines. He rose with the sun, worked with his hands, and ended each day with reflections written in his journal. Time passed not according to a clock, but according to the rhythm of the seasons, the behavior of animals, the movement of clouds. Solitude gave Dick space to think deeply. He pondered everything from weather patterns to human nature, often capturing these thoughts in poetic detail in his writings. He paid close attention to the world around him. The first snowfall, the return of migratory birds, the way ice formed on the lake's surface. And in doing so, he cultivated a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with people and everything to do with place. His connection to the wilderness wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. He felt part of the land, not above it. Far from becoming disconnected or hardened, Dick's time alone actually seemed to enhance his sense of empathy and awareness. He didn't seek isolation out of bitterness or misanthropy. He simply believed that there was immense value in being still, in listening to the natural world, and in depending on oneself. Solitude wasn't a punishment for him, it was liberation. It allowed him to shed the expectations of society, to live honestly and authentically, and to discover what truly mattered. Dick Proenneke didn't just live in the wilderness, he lived with it. Every decision he made, every routine he followed, and every object he created was shaped by a profound respect for the natural world. His existence at Twin Lakes wasn't about domination or conquest of nature, but about harmony, understanding, and balance. In a world increasingly disconnected from the environment, Dick's lifestyle stood as a rare example of what it means to be truly in tune with the earth. From the moment he arrived at Twin Lakes, Dick immersed himself in observing the land. He studied the migration of birds, the blooming cycles of wildflowers, the freeze and thaw of lakes, and the habits of local animals. These weren't idle curiosities. They were vital signs of the wilderness, helping him prepare for each season, anticipate changes, and live without disturbing the fragile ecosystems around him. Whether tracking bear prints near his cabin or watching how moose responded to weather shifts, Dick's awareness of nature was sharp, detailed, and respectful. He made a conscious effort to leave the smallest possible footprint. His cabin, constructed from local logs and built entirely by hand, blended into the forest rather than altering it. He never overhunted or overfished, taking only what he needed, never more. If he harvested berries or plants, he did so sparingly, ensuring there was plenty left for wildlife and future growth. His water came directly from the lake, his heat from wood he carefully gathered, and his meals were prepared with ingredients that came from the land itself. Seasons governed everything. In the spring, he repaired what winter had weathered. Summer was for harvesting, building, and stocking up. Fall brought preparation, firewood chopping, food preservation, gear repairs. Winter was for endurance and reflection, a time when nature rested, and so did he. Rather than resist these cycles, Dick adapted himself to them, living as an active participant in the environment instead of an outside observer. He saw himself not as a separate being from nature, but as one part of a larger, living system. This mindset extended beyond survival. Dick spoke often in his journals about the beauty of a sunrise over the lake, the elegance of an eagle soaring above the pines, or the stillness of snow blanketing the mountains. He didn't take these things for granted. They were daily reminders of how powerful, fragile, and awe-inspiring the world could be. His lifestyle was a kind of quiet protest, a statement that happiness, purpose, and fulfillment didn't require noise, consumption, or constant connection, but could be found in the rhythm of the wind and the wisdom of the woods. Over the course of his 30 years in the Alaskan wilderness, Dick Proenneke didn't just live an extraordinary life. He became a symbol, a living testament to the power of self-reliance, the beauty of simplicity, and the deep fulfillment that can come from living in harmony with nature. His story resonated with countless people around the world who yearned for a simpler, more authentic existence, far from the hustle and bustle of modern life. Dick showed that it was possible to not only survive in the wilderness, but to thrive, finding joy, purpose, and contentment in the quiet moments and humble tasks of daily life. His life was a demonstration that human ingenuity, when combined with patience and a deep respect for the environment, could create a fulfilling existence in the most challenging of circumstances. Unlike the typical survivalist or adventurer, Dick didn't live for the thrill of conquering nature. He lived to be at peace with it. This approach resonated with many who saw in Dick a person not just surviving, but flourishing. His ability to live in isolation, without the distractions and pressures of modern society, offered a compelling vision of how one could step away from the overwhelming complexities of the modern world and create a life of real meaning and satisfaction. What made Dick's journey even more remarkable was that he didn't do it for attention or recognition. He didn't set out to become a legend or inspire others. He simply followed his instincts, built a life for himself that was grounded in simplicity, and recorded it with such detail and care that it captured the imagination of generations to come. His journals, his filmed footage, and his unfiltered reflections on solitude and nature were gifts he gave to the world, not as a form of vanity, but as a way of sharing his authentic experience, an experience that was full of wisdom, resilience, and quiet joy. Dick's lifestyle, in a way, became a challenge to the modern narrative that success and happiness can only be found in wealth, consumerism, or social status. His story redefined what it means to lead a successful life. It wasn't about acquiring things, building a career, or accumulating followers. It was about the ability to live in alignment with one's values, to embrace the challenges of life with patience, and to find satisfaction in the small, everyday victories that come from hard work and dedication. Even after his death, Dick Proenneke's story continues to inspire people worldwide. His legacy endures through the film footage he left behind, the books that recount his journey, and the thousands of people who look to his life as a model of what it means to truly live, not just exist. His life in the Alaskan wilderness wasn't a quest for fame or fortune, it was a quest for meaning. And in that pursuit, he showed the world that the simplest life, one grounded in nature and self-sufficiency, can be the most extraordinary of all. Dick Proenneke's life is a powerful reminder that fulfillment doesn't come from the constant pursuit of material wealth or societal recognition, but from the peace found in simplicity and self-sufficiency. His decision to live in the Alaskan wilderness for over 30 years wasn't a quest for solitude, but a choice to live deliberately, to embrace each day with intention, patience, and respect for the natural world. Through his self-reliance, his journal entries, and his quiet dedication to living in harmony with nature, Dick not only survived but flourished in one of the most isolated places on Earth. In a world filled with distractions and constant noise, Dick's story encourages us all to consider what truly matters. Perhaps, like him, we can all find a way to reconnect with the world around us, to value the present moment, and to embrace the simplicity and serenity that nature offers. Dick Proenneke may have lived alone in the wilderness, but in doing so, he left a legacy that resonates with people everywhere, a legacy of self-reliance, peace, and a profound appreciation for the beauty of life in its simplest form.